January 10, 1940. Belgian border guardhouse near Mechelen-an-der-Maas, Belgium. Sergeant Franz Habetz stared at partially charred documents spread across a wooden table, smoke still rising from edges black with attempted destruction. German military insignia topped every page. Deployment orders, invasion routes, paratroop landing zones, attack dates. Major Helmuth Rheinberger sat in the corner, head in his hands, occasionally looking up at documents that should have been ash scattered across a frozen Belgian field 30 minutes earlier. In the adjacent room, Major Erich Hoenmans paced frantically, calculating how many hours remained until 400,000 German soldiers began an offensive that enemy intelligence now held in their hands. What neither German officer knew was that their accident had triggered the most consequential intelligence failure in modern warfare, one that would paradoxically ensure Germany's greatest victory while condemning France to its most catastrophic defeat. The stakes that January morning exceeded anything visible in those burned papers. Belgium, France, and Britain faced decisions that would determine whether Western Europe fell to Nazi conquest or held firm against the Wehrmacht's tested war machine. Germany's original invasion plan, Fall Gelb, Case Yellow, called for a massive thrust through the Low Countries, a replay of 1914's Schlieffen Plan, designed to avoid France's impregnable Maginot Line. The plan was conservative, methodical, and predicted to produce another grinding war of attrition that Germany could not afford. French Commander-in-Chief Maurice Gamelin commanded 117 Allied divisions on the northeastern front. His defensive strategy centered on the Dial Plan, meeting any German attack by advancing into Belgium to establish a defensive line along the Dial River. This would keep the fighting off French soil while utilizing Belgium's fortifications. British intelligence had been monitoring German force concentrations since September 1939, when 600,000 Belgian soldiers mobilized for neutrality defense. Now, with captured documents confirming German intentions, the scales seemed to tip decisively toward Allied preparedness. The human consequences were equally staggering. 10 million civilians lived in Belgium's industrial regions. France's northeastern cities housed millions more. Britain's expeditionary force of 340,000 men stood ready to cross the Channel. Germany fielded 3 million Wehrmacht troops for the Western offensive. Every miscalculation meant tens of thousands dead, cities destroyed, nations conquered. Rheinberger knew this as he watched Belgian intelligence officers photograph his briefcase's contents. His catastrophic failure to destroy these documents would cost lives measured in hundreds of thousands. What he couldn't know was that the lives lost would be precisely the opposite of those he feared. The intelligence he had failed to protect would doom not Germany, but the very nations now celebrating its capture. The morning began unremarkably at Lodenheide Air Base near Münster, Germany. Major Erich Hoenmans, 52-year-old base commander, prepared his Messerschmitt Bf 108 Typhoon for a routine flight to Cologne. The four-seat liaison aircraft was reliable, fast, and perfect for the 100-kilometer journey south. Hoenmans needed extra flying hours to maintain his certification. His wife lived in Cologne. He wanted to deliver laundry to her. These mundane details would reshape the war's entire trajectory. Personal convenience would alter the fate of nations. The previous evening, Hoenmans had encountered Major Helmuth Rheinberger in the officers' mess. Rheinberger, staff officer for 7. Flieger Division, was scheduled for meetings in Cologne regarding Operation Fall Gelb. The division was Germany's elite paratrooper unit, tasked with seizing bridges and fortifications behind Belgian lines during the invasion's opening hours. Rheinberger faced a tedious train journey carrying classified documents. Hoenmans offered him a ride. The two men shared drinks, discussed old times, agreed to meet at dawn. Neither consulted regulations explicitly forbidding transport of secret invasion plans by air without specific authorization. This oversight was a capital offense punishable by death. Reinberger had purchased a train ticket the previous day. The journey would take 6 hours through occupied territories, requiring multiple security checkpoints and document inspections. Flying would reduce travel time to 90 minutes. The efficiency seemed obvious. What both officers failed to consider was why Wehrmacht regulations specifically prohibited airborne transport of classified invasion plans. Aircraft could crash in enemy territory. Pilots could become disoriented in bad weather. Documents could fall into hostile hands through mechanical failure rather than enemy action. These scenarios weren't theoretical, they represented calculated risks that German High Command deemed unacceptable. But regulations written in Berlin seemed distant abstractions to field officers facing inconvenient train schedules. Hohnmans wanted to visit his wife. Reinberger wanted to avoid wasting an entire day in transit. Personal convenience trumped operational security protocols. This human tendency, prioritizing immediate comfort over distant potential consequences, would alter the course of world history. The regulations existed because German intelligence had studied World War I security failures. In 1914, Russian officers had been captured, carrying complete operational orders. German forces exploited this intelligence windfall at Tannenberg, destroying 2 Russian armies. The lesson was clear. Operational plans must never be concentrated in single vulnerable carriers. Yet here was Reinberger, carrying complete invasion plans for the Low Countries in a yellow pigskin briefcase. The briefcase contained deployment schedules for 29 divisions. Maps showed exact crossing points for the Meuse River. Tactical objectives for the first 72 hours were detailed down to specific bridges and crossroads. Paratroop landing zones were marked with precision coordinates. Air support assignments identified which Luftwaffe units would support which ground formations. Logistics schedules specified ammunition and fuel delivery timetables. The documents represented 6 months of staff planning by Germany's finest military minds. At 11:00 a.m., fog banks reduced visibility to near zero. Hohnmans, disoriented, changed course westward, hoping to spot the Rhine River for navigation reference. He had already crossed the Rhine without realizing it. The frozen river was indistinguishable from snow-covered ground. The Messerschmitt flew deeper into Holland, then crossed into Belgian airspace. Weather conditions that morning were particularly treacherous. Cloud ceiling dropped to 200 meters. Horizontal visibility measured less than 500 meters. Ice accumulated on the Messerschmitt's wings, adding weight and reducing lift. The engine sputtered. Hohnmans had accidentally moved a cockpit lever, cutting fuel supply. The propeller stopped. Silence replaced the engine's steady drone. Hohnmans executed an emergency landing in a snow-covered field near the village of Vught, just inside the Belgian border. The Messerschmitt's skis dug into deep snow, bringing the aircraft to an abrupt halt. Both officers climbed out, shaken but uninjured. A Belgian farmhand approached across the frozen field. The conventional wisdom throughout Europe's intelligence services held that German invasion plans were closely guarded, compartmentalized, and immune to accidental exposure. Wehrmacht operational security protocols demanded multiple safeguards. No single officer carried complete attack plans. Documents moved by courier under armed guard. Radio communications used unbreakable Enigma encryption. Air transport of classified materials required explicit authorization from German High Command. These procedures had worked flawlessly through Poland's conquest. German forces had achieved complete tactical surprise in September 1939, overwhelming Polish defenses before effective mobilization could occur. The full Gel plan represented months of staff work by Germany's best military minds. General Franz Halder's original design called for Army Group B to thrust through Holland and Belgium with 6 of Germany's 10 panzer divisions, driving Allied forces back to the Channel coast. Army Group A would provide supporting attacks through the Ardennes. Army Group C would pin French forces at the Maginot Line. It was methodical, conventional, and, critically, predictable. French intelligence expected exactly this approach because it mirrored World War I's German strategy. Gamelin had accurately predicted the invasion's axis of advance. His Dial plan positioned French and British forces to meet the anticipated German offensive in central Belgium, utilizing prepared defensive positions along the Dial River. The plan appeared sound. French forces outnumbered German attackers in the threatened sector. Allied aircraft and tanks matched German equivalents in quality and quantity. Belgium's fortified positions at Eben Emael and along the Albert Canal would delay German spearheads, allowing Allied armies time to establish blocking positions. Military theorists gave the Allies excellent chances of containing any German offensive. French armor was superior in individual tank quality. The Char B-1 Beers outgunned and out-armored German panzers. The French tank mounted a 75 mm hull gun and 47 mm turret gun compared to German panzers' 37 mm main armament. Armor thickness on French tanks reached 60 mm versus 30 mm on German Panzer III's. French artillery possessed greater range and hitting power than German equivalents. The legendary French 75 mm field gun remained the world's finest light artillery piece. Heavy artillery battalions fielded 155 mm howitzers capable of devastating defensive fire. The French Army's reputation, built on victory in 1918, suggested formidable fighting power. But German officers like Rheinberger knew that conventional wisdom masked operational details that could prove decisive. The timing, specific units, landing zones for paratroopers, initial objectives. These particulars transformed abstract strategy into executable battle plans. And now these details lay on a Belgian officer's desk, photographed by enemy intelligence, transmitted to Allied command. The security breach appeared total, catastrophic, and irreversible. When Hoonmans and Rheinberger climbed from the crashed Messerschmitt, a Belgian farmhand approached asking in Flemish where they were. Neither German spoke Flemish, but the name Mechelen and Belgique made the situation horrifyingly clear. Rheinberger remembered his yellow pigskin briefcase still in the aircraft. He rushed back, retrieved it, shouted to Hoonmans that secret documents must be destroyed immediately. Hoonmans created a diversion, engaging the farmhand in conversation while Rheinberger attempted document destruction. His cigarette lighter malfunctioned. Cheap German military issue, unreliable in cold weather. Rheinberger grabbed the farmhand's lighter, obtained a single match, hid behind a thicket of bushes. He piled the documents, struck the match, watched flames catch the edges of tactical maps and deployment orders. The papers were thick, watermarked, resistant to burning. Military-grade document stock was designed to resist accidental destruction, a quality that now worked against its security. Smoke rose into clear winter air. The single match wasn't producing enough heat to consume the documents quickly. Rheinberger frantically separated pages, trying to expose more surface area to flames. Fire consumed map edges but left center sections intact. Typed orders charred but remained partially legible. Unit designations and deployment schedules survived the flames. 2 Belgian border guards, Sergeant Franz Habetz and Private Gerard Rubens, arrived on bicycles. They had heard the aircraft's engine failure, watched the emergency landing. cycled toward the crash site expecting injured civilian pilots. Seeing smoke, Rubens rushed toward the thicket. Reinberger panicked, gathered partially burned documents, attempted to flee. Habitz fired 2 warning shots. The rifle reports echoed across the frozen field. Reinberger surrendered. The Germans were escorted to the Belgian border guardhouse near Mechelen-aan-de-Maas. Captain Arthur Roderick conducted initial interrogation. The documents lay on a wooden table, edges charred. Content partially readable. Maps showed arrows indicating attack vectors through Belgium and Holland. Detailed annotations marked objectives, phase lines, and consolidation positions. Unit designations marked paratrooper landing zones at Namur, bridges at Maastricht, fortifications at Eben-Emael. Invasion date, January 17, 1940, 7 days away. Detailed orders specified that 7 Flieger Division would execute the war's first major paratrooper assault, seizing bridges across the Albert Canal before Belgian defenders could demolish them. The operation required split-second timing, coordinated with ground forces advancing from Germany. The documents included contingency plans, alternative objectives if primary targets were destroyed, withdrawal routes if operations failed, command succession if senior officers became casualties. Reinberger could see the documents from his seat. He whispered urgently to Hoonmans. They hatched a desperate plan. Hoonmans would request escort to the washroom. While guards attended him, Reinberger would seize the documents and thrust them into the lit stove, heating the guardhouse. The plan failed spectacularly. Roderick intercepted Reinberger's lunge toward the table. The major tried grabbing Roderick's revolver, shouting he wanted to kill himself. Hoonmans supported him. You can't blame him. He's a regular officer. He's finished now. The statement revealed Wehrmacht culture's rigid hierarchy and unforgiving standards. Officers who compromised operations faced court-martial and execution. Personal honor demanded suicide rather than capture with classified documents intact. Reinberger understood that his career, reputation, and possibly his life had ended the moment those papers survived the flames. Belgian intelligence officers arrived within 2 hours. They photographed every page, every charred map section, every legible order. The documents went to Section 2, Military Intelligence, at Belgian Army General Staff Headquarters in Brussels. By late afternoon, General Raoul van Overstraeten examined the photographs. The material appeared authentic. Italian Foreign Minister Galeazzo Ciano had recently warned Belgium of German attack plans scheduled around January 15. The captured documents corroborated Ciano's intelligence. Belgian cryptographers cross-referenced unit designations against radio intercept databases compiled over 4 months of signals intelligence gathering. Every detail matched. Call signs corresponded to known Wehrmacht formations. Divisional assignments aligned with intercepted communications traffic. The authentication process convinced Belgian intelligence that these documents represented genuine operational orders, not elaborate deception material. Belgian intelligence had been intercepting German radio transmissions since September 1939. They had catalogued call signs for 217 German military units. They had mapped communication networks connecting field units to higher headquarters. They had analyzed transmission patterns revealing operational routines and command relationships. The captured documents fit this accumulated knowledge perfectly. Radio intercepts had detected increased activity by 7. Flieger Division, communications between Luftwaffe units and Army Group B headquarters had surged in recent weeks. Supply requisitions intercepted through various channels matched the invasion timeline detailed in Reinberger's papers. By evening, King Leopold III authorized notification of Belgian Defense Minister General Henry Denny. and French Commander-in-Chief Gamelin. At 5:15 p.m., Lieutenant Colonel Hautcoeur, French liaison officer in Brussels, received a 2-page summary. The intelligence windfall seemed complete. Allied command believed they had gained decisive advantage through fortuitous accident. Intelligence tradecraft emphasizes verification through multiple independent sources. Belgian cryptographers had been intercepting German military radio traffic since September 1939, building databases of unit call signs, communication patterns, operational procedures. The captured documents matched this accumulated signals intelligence perfectly. Unit designations corresponded to radio intercepts. Attack timing aligned with observed German troop movements along the Belgian frontier. Swiss intelligence had detected 6 to 7 panzer divisions concentrating near the Luxembourg-Belgian-German border during March 1940. French aerial reconnaissance confirmed German engineering units constructing pontoon bridges across the Our River at the Luxembourg border. Every detail corroborated the captured documents' authenticity. German cipher security appeared compromised. Enigma intercepts, though indecipherable, showed message volume surges corresponding to the invasion date mentioned in Reinberger's papers. Belgian counterintelligence ruled out elaborate German deception. The manner of document capture, accidental aircraft malfunction, desperate destruction attempts, officers' genuine distress, indicated legitimate operational security failure rather than planned disinformation. German embassy protests demanding document return reinforced authenticity. German diplomats in Brussels contacted Belgian Foreign Ministry officials within hours of the incident, demanding immediate return of private papers seized from German officers who had accidentally strayed into Belgian airspace. The diplomatic pressure confirmed that Berlin understood the document's importance. No elaborate deception operation would include genuine high-level diplomatic intervention. The German ambassador personally visited Belgian Foreign Ministry headquarters. He claimed the documents were routine administrative materials of no military significance. He insisted their seizure violated international law governing treatment of officers who accidentally entered neutral territory. His obvious distress convinced Belgian officials the documents were authentic and valuable. Within 24 hours, Allied intelligence assessed the captured plans as genuine German operational orders for imminent offensive operations. The assessment was correct. What no one considered was whether Germany would adapt its plans after the catastrophic security breach. The possibility of rapid strategic revision seemed implausible given military bureaucracy's normal pace. Traditional military doctrine held that wholesale strategic revision required months. Changing army group assignments, redeploying divisions, revising logistical networks, briefing commanders. Such modifications were considered logistically impossible on short notice. German operational rigidity was legendary. Once invasion plans were set, Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized execution, regardless of changed circumstances. The Kaiser's armies in 1914 had followed inflexible timetables despite tactical setbacks. German mobilization schedules in August 1914 were so rigid that troop trains couldn't be rerouted without creating chaos. When Kaiser Wilhelm II suggested concentrating forces against Russia instead of France, Chief of Staff Helmuth von Moltke declared it impossible. Surely Hitler's Wehrmacht, despite its modern weapons, retained this doctrinal conservatism. This assumption would prove fatally wrong. The Mechelen incident triggered the most rapid and radical strategic revision in modern military history. German high command, confronted with total plan exposure, would transform catastrophe into opportunity, conventional assault into revolutionary warfare, and Allied foreknowledge into decisive vulnerability. Adolf Hitler received notification of the Mechelen incident at 7:00 p.m., January 10, 1940. His rage was volcanic. General Alfred Jodl, Wehrmacht Chief of Operations, recommended immediate cancellation of the invasion scheduled for January 17th. Hitler concurred. Heavy snowfall along the German-Belgian border provided convenient justification for postponement. Weather conditions made immediate offensive operations impractical, regardless of security considerations. But Hitler's directive went far beyond simple delay. He demanded complete operational plan revision. The entire operation must be built on new foundations to ensure secrecy and surprise. Hitler understood that the Mechelen documents had exposed more than German plans. They had revealed Allied intentions. Belgium's willingness to allow French and British forces entry demonstrated Allied defensive strategy. The Dial Plan's logic was now transparent to German planners. The captured documents had disclosed not just German plans, but Allied deployment intentions. If Belgium allowed French and British armies to establish defensive positions along the Dial, the Allies revealed their strategic priorities: defend Belgium's industrial heartland, prevent repetition of 1914's German advance. This disclosure was intelligence gold. Germany now knew exactly where Allied forces would concentrate. Hitler saw opportunity where others saw disaster. General Erich von Manstein, Chief of Staff for Army Group A, had been championing an alternative operational concept for months. Instead of the main thrust through Belgium's northeastern frontier, Manstein proposed concentrating German armor in the Ardennes forest for a surprise attack towards Sedan. The Ardennes, densely wooded, hilly Baukow, considered impassable by French military planners, would be the invasion's Schwerpunkt, its decisive point. Once across the Meuse River between Sedan and Dinant, German panzer divisions would execute a Sichel-Schnitt, a sickle cut, racing to the Channel coast, encircling Allied armies that had advanced into Belgium. The concept was audacious, risky, and completely contrary to conventional military wisdom. Manstein had been developing this concept since October 1939. His commander, General Gerd von Rundstedt, supported the proposal. Together they had submitted 7 memoranda to German High Command. Each memorandum was rejected. German High Command had repeatedly rejected Manstein's proposals throughout October, November, and December 1939. Too risky, logistically impractical, dependent on speed and coordination that mechanized forces couldn't sustain through difficult terrain. Halder, the Wehrmacht's Chief of General Staff, found Manstein's proposals professionally offensive. The suggestions implied that Halder's carefully crafted plans were inadequate. Manstein's persistence in submitting memoranda, 7 separate proposals between October 31st and January 12th, annoyed senior commanders. On January 27th, Halder arranged Manstein's transfer to command an infantry corps in Stettin, effectively removing him from operational planning responsibilities. The bureaucratic exile was intended to silence Manstein's dissenting voice. Instead, it positioned him perfectly for Hitler's attention. Manstein's supporters on Hitler's staff arranged a meeting. The timing was perfect. Hitler was desperate for alternatives after the Mechelen disaster. The Mechelen incident changed everything. On February 13, 1940, Jodl's diary records Hitler's decisive conversation. "We should attack in the direction of Sedan. The enemy is not expecting us to attack there." The documents held by the Luftwaffe officers who crash-landed have convinced the enemy that we only intend to take over the Dutch and Belgian coasts. Hitler grasped Manstein's concept instantly. The captured documents became deception tools. Allied intelligence, believing they possessed Germany's invasion plan, would position forces accordingly. Germany would attack precisely where the Allies expected, but with reduced forces, making it a diversion. The real offensive would strike through the supposedly impassable Ardennes. French defenders in the Sedan sector consisted primarily of Series B divisions, reservist formations with obsolete equipment, minimal training, and low combat readiness ratings. These units were positioned in the quiet sector, precisely because French planners believed the Ardennes terrain precluded major offensive operations. The 55th Infantry Division, which would bear the brunt of Guderian's assault, was rated among the weakest in the French army. On February 17th, Hitler met personally with Manstein. The Führer had independently developed similar ideas about attacking through the Ardennes, making him receptive to Manstein's detailed operational concepts. Manstein presented his case with maps, logistics calculations, and detailed timing estimates. Hitler approved immediately. Within days, Aufmarschanweisung ne Vorfahr, Fall Gelb, the fourth and final revision of Case Yellow, became official Wehrmacht strategy. Army Group A received 7 of Germany's 10 panzer divisions. This represented the largest concentration of armored forces in military history. The panzer divisions were organized into 3 corps under coordinated command. General Heinz Guderian's 19,000 Panzer Corps, equipped with 1st, 2nd, and 10th Panzer Divisions plus Großdeutschland Regiment, would spearhead the Sedan assault. General Georg Hans Reinhardt's XLI Panzer Corps would attack at Monthermé. General Hermann Hoth's 15th Panzer Corps would cross the Meuse at Dinant. Together, these forces would rupture French defences along a 40-kilometre front. Army Group B retained 3 panzer divisions for the Belgian diversion. 20 divisions transferred from the Dutch frontier to the Ardennes sector. The logistical complexity was staggering. Moving entire divisions with their equipment, ammunition, fuel, and supplies required thousands of rail movements and road marches. Every movement had to remain concealed from Allied reconnaissance. German planners used elaborate deception measures. Radio transmissions from units transferring south were simulated by remaining units in the north. Vehicle movements occurred at night. Units maintained their northern sector call signs even after deploying to the Ardennes. False supply requisitions were filed for northern sectors to maintain the deception. The operational transformation was complete by late February, accomplished in 6 weeks, contradicting every assumption about military bureaucracy's limitations. What German planners couldn't know was whether Allied intelligence would detect the strategic shift. Signals, intelligence intercepts, aerial reconnaissance, agent reports, any of these sources might reveal the changed German dispositions and ruin the entire deception. French intelligence received multiple warnings about the modified German plan. On March 8, Belgian King Leopold and General van Overstraeten warned Gamelin directly. Belgian intelligence assessed that the Mechelen documents had prompted German plan revision. They predicted the alternative German approach would concentrate panzer forces farther south, striking through the Ardennes towards Sedan to execute an encirclement maneuver. The prediction was remarkably accurate. Belgian intelligence had independently deduced Manstein's operational concept. Belgian analysts reasoned that Germany wouldn't execute a plan the enemy had captured. They expected German staff to develop alternatives. The Ardennes represented the most logical alternative axis of advance. Gamelin ignored the warnings. His reasoning appeared sound. The Ardennes terrain was unsuitable for massed armor. The forest roads were narrow, winding, and incapable of supporting rapid military traffic. Moving hundreds of tanks, thousands of vehicles, and tens of thousands of troops through narrow forest roads was logistically impractical. The roads couldn't support the traffic density required for rapid offensive operations. Guderian would need days, possibly weeks, to concentrate sufficient force at the Meuse to attempt a crossing. French defenders would have ample warning and time to reinforce the threatened sector. Gamelin's assessment reflected conventional military analysis. The Ardennes had been considered impassable to large mechanized forces since the advent of armored warfare. French staff studies concluded that moving a single panzer division through the forest would require 48 hours minimum. Moving 7 divisions simultaneously appeared impossible. French military doctrine held that terrain determined tactical possibilities. Dense forests channeled movement onto predictable routes. Narrow roads created bottlenecks, preventing rapid concentration. River crossings required extensive preparation. Therefore, the Ardennes couldn't support the kind of rapid offensive operation Manstein envisioned. On April 30, 1940, French intelligence received another report from their military attaché in Bern. The main German assault would strike the Meuse at Sedan between May 8 and May 10. This was precise, accurate, and based on high-confidence sources. Gamelin disregarded it. The report contradicted his fundamental assessment of German capabilities. Swiss intelligence detected the concentration of German armor divisions along the Belgian-Luxembourg-German border. French aerial reconnaissance photographed German engineering units building pontoon bridges designed for the Our River crossing. Clear preparation for Ardennes operations. Gamelin remained committed to the Dial Plan. He interpreted the intelligence as confirming a secondary German effort, not the main attack. Perhaps he considered the German build-up another deception, designed to pull French reserves away from the anticipated main effort in Belgium. Perhaps professional pride prevented acknowledging that his original assessment might be wrong. Perhaps he simply couldn't imagine Wehrmacht staff abandoning their methodical, conventional approach for the revolutionary warfare Manstein envisioned. Perhaps the captured Mechelen documents had created such strong confirmation of his pre-existing beliefs that contradictory evidence couldn't penetrate his cognitive framework. Gamelin had built his entire defensive strategy on the captured documents. He had briefed political leadership based on those documents. He had deployed forces according to the threat those documents described. Acknowledging that the documents were now obsolete meant admitting fundamental strategic error. Regardless of motivation, Gamelin's decision proved catastrophic. When Germany attacked on May 10, 1940, Allied forces executed their planned advance into Belgium exactly as Manstein's deception strategy required. The British Expeditionary Force and France's best mechanized divisions, including 5 armored divisions representing the strategic reserve, raced northeast to establish the Dial Line. They moved directly into the trap. May 10, 1940. The German invasion began with textbook execution of Army Group B's diversionary assault. Paratroopers seized the Belgian fortress of Eben-Emael in a spectacular airborne operation that utilized gliders and shaped charges to neutralize what had been considered Europe's most impregnable fortification. 78 German engineers descended onto the fortress roof in 11 gliders. They planted shaped charges directly onto steel cupolas, protecting Belgian gun positions. The explosive charges burned through thick steel armor, killing gun crews and destroying defensive positions. Within 24 hours, Eben-Emael surrendered. The fortress that was supposed to hold for weeks fell in one day. Panzer divisions crossed the Dutch frontier, driving toward Rotterdam. The Luftwaffe bombed Dutch and Belgian airfields, destroying aircraft on the ground. Allied command responded exactly as German planners predicted. Gamelin committed the 7th Army to race north and link with Dutch forces at Breda. The Breda variant of the Dial Plan that extended Allied lines even farther from the coming breakthrough point. The British Expeditionary Force advanced to defensive positions along the Dial River between Louvain and Wavre. French First Army secured the Gembloux Gap, the crucial sector between British forces and the Meuse. France's best divisions, newest tanks, most experienced commanders, all moved northeast, away from the Ardennes. The strategic reserve that might have contained the German breakthrough at Sedan was committed to defensive positions 150 kilometers north of where it would be desperately needed. While Allied attention focused on Belgium, Panzer Group Kleist, 5 panzer divisions, 41,000 motor vehicles, 134,000 soldiers, 1,600 tanks, advanced through the Ardennes. General Gunther von Blumentritt described the spectacle. Like a giant phalanx, stretched back for 100 miles, the rear rank lying 50 miles to the east of the Rhine. The column filled every road through the forest. Traffic management was extraordinary. Vehicles moved nose to tail at prescribed speeds, regulated by military police at every intersection. Overhead, Luftwaffe fighters provided air cover, intercepting Allied reconnaissance attempts. Belgian and French cavalry units in the Ardennes provided only token resistance. They were equipped for reconnaissance, not stopping mechanized armies. The Chasseurs Ardennais, Belgium's elite forest infantry, fought courageously but lacked anti-tank weapons adequate to halt panzer divisions. French light mechanized divisions conducted delaying actions, but were systematically brushed aside by overwhelming German firepower. Each French cavalry unit that encountered the German columns reported massive armored forces, but higher headquarters dismissed these reports as exaggerated. By evening, May 12th, Guderian's panzer divisions reached the Meuse River on either side of Sedan. The crossing, expected by Gamelin to take days of preparation, began May 13th. At 4:00 p.m., German infantry crossed in assault boats under covering fire from tanks and artillery. The assault was preceded by the most intensive air bombardment in military history to that point. Luftwaffe bombers concentrated on French bunkers and artillery positions, delivering sustained attacks that collapsed the morale of French 55th Division. Over 1,000 aircraft participated in the aerial assault, the largest concentration of air power in military history to that point. Stuka's dive bombers attacked in waves, their sirens adding psychological terror to explosive destruction. The division, composed of reservists with obsolete equipment, broke under the onslaught. French soldiers abandoned defensive positions. Officers lost control of their units. Communications networks collapsed under the bombardment. By evening, German forces held bridgeheads on the west bank of the Meuse. Engineers constructed pontoon bridges under intermittent French artillery fire. German pioneers worked through the night, assembling bridge sections while under sporadic shelling. Panzers crossed the river during the night. May 14th, German armor broke through French defensive lines, advancing westward toward the Channel coast. The breakthrough was complete. German mechanized forces had penetrated into open country, beyond French prepared defensive positions. Guderian's panzers advanced 50 kilometers on May 14th. They covered 60 kilometers on May 15th. French defenders couldn't establish new defensive lines faster than German armor could advance. French counterattacks were uncoordinated, piecemeal, and ineffective. General Charles de Gaulle's 4th Armored Division attacked at Montcornet on May 17th, achieving tactical success but lacking strategic support. De Gaulle's tanks penetrated German positions but had to withdraw when infantry and artillery support failed to arrive. The isolated armored thrust couldn't hold gains without combined arms coordination. De Gaulle destroyed several German supply columns. His tanks penetrated 10 kilometers into German rear areas. But without infantry to hold ground, without artillery to suppress German counterattacks, without air support to prevent Luftwaffe strikes, the attack achieved nothing permanent. De Gaulle withdrew after suffering significant tank losses. By May 20th, Guderian reached Abbeville on the Channel coast. Allied armies in Belgium were cut off from their supplies, encircled, facing annihilation or evacuation. The French government prepared to abandon Paris. The campaign that French planners expected to last months had effectively ended in 10 days. Prime Minister Paul Reynaud telephoned Winston Churchill at 7:30 a.m., May 15th. Speaking in English under obvious stress, Reynaud announced, "We have been defeated, we are beaten, we have lost the battle." Churchill responded, "Surely it can't have happened so soon." Reynaud replied, "The front is broken near Sedan." Churchill flew to Paris that afternoon to assess the situation personally. He found the French government already burning classified documents in preparation for evacuation. Smoke rose from courtyard fires, where ministry officials destroyed archives. The psychological collapse preceded the military disaster. The psychological shock paralyzed French command. Gamelin, asked about launching counterattacks, responded, "With what? I have no more reserves. Between Lyon and Paris, I do not have a single corps of soldiers at my disposal." This was inaccurate. Reserves existed, but were scattered along the front, unavailable for immediate decisive action. The French command structure, designed for methodical warfare with extensive preparation time, couldn't adapt to the fluid breakthrough battle. Orders took hours to reach frontline units. Situation reports were outdated by the time they reached headquarters. German commanders couldn't believe their success. Guderian's memoir records, "I never received any further order as to what I was to do once the bridgehead over the Meuse was captured. All my decisions, until I reached the Atlantic seaboard at Abbeville, were taken by me and me alone." The operational breakthrough had exceeded Wehrmacht planning assumptions. Hitler himself ordered temporary halts on May 17, 22 and 24, fearing German spearheads were overextended and vulnerable to Allied counterattacks. The most controversial halt order came May 24th, when German panzers stood just kilometers from Dunkirk. Hitler's decision to halt armored forces while infantry caught up allowed the British Expeditionary Force time to establish defensive perimeters around the evacuation beaches. Historians still debate Hitler's motivations for the halt order. Some argue he wanted to preserve armored forces for future operations. Others suggest he hoped Britain might negotiate peace if the BEF escaped destruction. Göring may have convinced Hitler that the Luftwaffe could destroy trapped Allied forces without risking precious panzers. But French and British forces couldn't coordinate responses quickly enough. The fluid battlefield situation overwhelmed Allied command structures designed for methodical warfare. Radio communications were inadequate for coordinating rapid movements. Staff procedures required written orders approved by multiple headquarters. By the time decisions were made and transmitted, battlefield conditions had changed. Operation Dynamo evacuated 338,226 British, French and Belgian troops from Dunkirk between May 27 and June 4, 1940. This salvaged the core of Britain's army but represented complete defeat for Allied strategy in France. The evacuation required 933 ships, destroyers, minesweepers, passenger ferries, fishing boats, private yachts. British losses included 6 destroyers sunk and 19 damaged. The Luftwaffe attacked evacuation beaches continuously. Stukas dive-bombed ships approaching Dunkirk harbour. Fighters strafed troops waiting on beaches for rescue. RAF Fighter Command flew 2,739 sorties, providing air cover, losing 106 aircraft. On June 5th, Germany launched Full Rot, Case Red, the second phase offensive southward through France. French forces fought doggedly, but lacked numbers, equipment, and strategic depth to halt the German advance. Paris was declared an open city, June 13th, abandoning defensive efforts to spare the capital from destruction. Paris fell June 14th. France signed armistice terms June 22, 1940, at Compiègne in the same railway car where Germany had surrendered in 1918. Hitler personally attended the ceremony, ensuring maximum symbolic humiliation of France. The armistice divided France into an occupied zone under German military administration and an unoccupied zone governed by the collaborationist Vichy regime. France's defeat was total, comprehensive, and stunning in its speed. The final accounting was brutal. Allied casualties totaled 2,292,000, including 360,000 French casualties, with approximately 90,000 Hollands killed, 200,000 wounded, and 1,900,000 missing or captured as prisoners of war. Belgian casualties reached 6,000 killed and 15,150 wounded during their 18-day campaign. British forces suffered 68,000 casualties, though evacuation at Dunkirk preserved the army's core for future operations. German casualties were 156,492, including 27,074 killed and 111,034 wounded. Germany lost 30% of its tanks and aircraft during the campaign. The asymmetry was striking. Germany conquered France, Belgium, and the Netherlands in 6 weeks at the cost of fewer casualties than France suffered in capturing a single fortified city during World War I. The casualty exchange ratio favored Germany by approximately 15-1. The operational success vindicated Manstein's revolutionary concept and Guderian's armored warfare doctrine. Traditional military assumptions about terrain, logistics, and operational tempo had been shattered. Conventional wisdom held that defenders possessed inherent advantages in modern warfare. Prepared positions, interior lines, concentrated firepower. The Battle of France proved that mobility, surprise, and aggressive exploitation could overwhelm static defense. The Mechelen incident's ultimate consequence was this: the captured documents that seemed to give Allies decisive intelligence advantage instead became the catalyst for Germany's most innovative operational planning. Rheinberger's failed document destruction forced Germany to abandon conventional strategy for revolutionary warfare. Gamelin's fixation on the captured plans blinded him to Germany's adaptive response. The intelligence windfall became a trap that ensnared the very forces it was meant to protect. Major Helmuth Rheinberger and Major Erich Hohnmanns were tried in absentia in Germany, condemned to death for transporting secret documents without authorization. The verdicts were never executed. Both men were held in Belgian, British, and Canadian prisoner-of-war camps. Hohnmanns was exchanged in 1943, Rheinberger in 1944. On returning to Germany, both faced military courts. Rheinberger was dismissed from the Luftwaffe and assigned to administrative functions in the Volkssturm, the last-ditch militia formed in 1944 as Germany faced inevitable defeat. He was fully acquitted. Courts found he was not accountable for the grave consequences of his transgression. The accident had been precisely that: an accident, not deliberate treason. Hohnmann's fate was darker. His wife Annie was interrogated by the Gestapo, suspected of complicity in his treason. The Gestapo believed that Hohnmann's might have deliberately crashed in Belgium to defect. Annie's interrogation was brutal. She died during interrogation. His 2 sons were permitted to serve in the Wehrmacht and were killed in action during the war. The family paid a terrible price for Hohnmann's navigational error and mechanical mistake. For the 2 German officers, the Mechelen incident meant professional destruction, family tragedy, and permanent association with intelligence failure. Neither could know that their accident had inadvertently ensured German victory rather than defeat. The Mechelen incident revealed that modern warfare's most dangerous intelligence wasn't enemy plans. It was misunderstanding how enemies would respond to exposed plans. The captured documents provided Allies with perfect foreknowledge of German intentions circa January 1940. But military organizations are not static. Wehrmacht staff, confronted with compromised strategy, discarded conventional operations for innovative warfare. The captured intelligence became obsolete the moment it was photographed. Yet Allied command, possessing confirmed German plans, invested psychological commitment in strategies based on outdated information. Gamelin couldn't mentally pivot from the dial plan, even when receiving warnings that German dispositions had changed. The documents had anchored his thinking, creating cognitive inflexibility that persisted despite contrary evidence. This phenomenon, intelligence paradoxically increasing rather than decreasing uncertainty, would recur throughout the war. German reliance on Enigma encryption created overconfidence that persisted even after security breaches. Japanese confidence in purple cipher invulnerability blinded them to American signals intelligence success. Soviet intelligence officers dismissed warnings about Operation Barbarossa because they contradicted Stalin's assessment of German intentions. In each case, possession of information created false certainty that prevented adaptive response. Perfect intelligence about yesterday's plans became dangerous misinformation about tomorrow's operations. The speed of strategic adaptation exceeded the speed of intelligence dissemination and analysis. The Mechelen incident's lessons extend to modern intelligence practice. Operational security failures expose not just current plans, but reveal how adversaries think, what they prioritize, where they concentrate forces. This meta-intelligence, intelligence about intelligence, provides adaptive advantage that transcends specific operational details. Germany's transformation of the Mechelen security breach into deception opportunity demonstrated intelligence warfare's highest art. The documents disclosed Allied deployment doctrine. Manstein exploited this disclosure by designing operations specifically to leverage Allied assumptions against themselves. The most brilliant deception isn't inventing false information, it's structuring operations so adversaries' true information leads them toward defeat. Reinberger's partially burned documents accomplished what German deception specialists couldn't have designed. They convinced Allied command they possessed complete understanding of German intentions, creating overconfidence that prevented questioning assumptions when evidence suggested otherwise. The captured plans were genuine, which made them the perfect deception tool once Germany revised its strategy. Allied intelligence analysts congratulated themselves on obtaining enemy invasion plans through fortuitous accident. They verified authenticity through multiple intelligence streams. They briefed political and military leadership on German intentions. They positioned forces to counter the anticipated offensive. Every step was professionally competent, analytically sound, and strategically disastrous. The intelligence collection was perfect, the analysis was thorough, the dissemination was timely, the strategic consequences were catastrophic. Modern intelligence services study the Mechelen incident as a case study in the limitations of static intelligence. Photographs of enemy documents provide snapshots, not continuing surveillance. Verified information becomes misinformation once circumstances change. The most dangerous intelligence is accurate information that's no longer current, because it carries credibility that outdated material normally lacks. Sergeant Franz Habetz and Private Gerard Rubens couldn't have known that their quick response to smoke rising from Belgian bushes would reshape the war. They rescued documents from flames, prevented Reinberger from completing destruction, preserved intelligence that reached Allied command within hours. Their actions were professional, competent, and precisely correct according to their training. The intelligence they secured was authentic, verified, and strategically valuable. Yet it contributed to Allied defeat by creating false certainty about German intentions. Intelligence gathering is necessary but insufficient. Intelligence analysis must account for adversary adaptation. This principle, learned through French blood in 1940, shapes modern military doctrine. The Mechelen incident demonstrated that knowing enemy plans matters less than understanding whether enemies will change plans once they're exposed. That lesson, purchased at terrible cost, endures in every intelligence service worldwide. Contemporary intelligence doctrine emphasizes dynamic assessment, continuously updating threat analysis as adversaries adapt to compromised operations. Static intelligence, no matter how accurate at acquisition, becomes liability when it prevents recognizing changed circumstances. The two Belgian border guards who pedaled their bicycles toward a crashed German aircraft on that frozen January morning performed their duties with exemplary professionalism. They secured prisoners, preserved evidence, reported through proper channels. Military decorations would have been appropriate. Instead, their successful intelligence collection became an object lesson in how perfect tactical success can enable strategic disaster. The Mechelen incident remains unique in military history, the only known case where successful enemy intelligence collection directly caused the collecting side's catastrophic defeat. Every intelligence officer studies this case. Every military strategist considers its implications. The lesson is uncomfortable but essential. In warfare's highest levels, success and failure often depend less on what you know than on understanding what your knowledge means. Reinberger's yellow pigskin briefcase changed the course of Western civilization. The documents inside should have warned the Allies. Instead, they blinded them. The greatest intelligence coup of early World War II became the greatest intelligence failure. Intelligence failure, intelligence failure, intelligence failure, intelligence failure, intelligence failure, intelligence failure.